Hello, this is Keith. I'm with EveningsHadowsTarot.com. I do readings and I have games on my station. I think after today I will have had 50 different videos on here, and I've been on the air for on YouTube for about a month now. And I hope you will subscribe and give replies and give me thumbs up. And I just hope you'll enjoy my channel. As I said, I have games and there are 50 different videos. This is going to be, I'm doing just about 4 videos and where I talk. I don't do these just interesting stories that I think you might enjoy. And this is one of the paintings that I just did a short time ago, and I'm using it to talk about, tell the stories. Before I was born, my parents were living in a small house and in a small town. And it was wartime, and they had been married a short period of time, and the war was going on, World War II, and I want to talk a little bit about what it was like from what they told me. I asked lots of questions after I was older about it. There happened to be, in this small town, even though there weren't a whole lot of people, and we weren't it wasn't even a big town. During World War II, we had 3 air bases, 3 separate air bases. In fact, we had one that had prisoners of war there, which was unusual for Texas, especially the Panhandle. And this is about, they had a barn and behind their house, a garage, so it's at the edge of town. And my mother used to love movies, and every time they didn't have TV in those days, and she went to every time they changed the movie. They had 2 theaters in this small town because of the air bases, and when the people would come in to town, they would the soldiers, they would ride in, especially on weekends, and that way we had 2 different theaters, and if you'd seen one of the movies, you could go to the other theater. And so it was very interesting. They also would bring people into town, the soldiers, just to maybe they would go different places and have coffee or something. I don't think they had bars in those days in this small town. Not that they were against drinking, they just didn't have them. The soldiers, my dad told me there were so many soldiers Saturday nights that you could not walk down through the street, which was fairly wide and it's brick streets. And they had all the stores there, and at night, of course, the stores were closed. The theater was open, maybe a cafe or 2. And but there were so many people that you couldn't walk on the sidewalk. You had to get out and walk in the street to get up and down the main street. They had dances for the officers, and women from town volunteered to go out and dance with the officers. Usually the officers were married, but their wives weren't with them. There was the shortage of housing, and if there was a couple that was married, then the wife wanted to be with the husband who was a soldier. You know, she had to come there and find rent. She either had to rent a room, or Mother told me that a lot of times they would take a chicken coop and sweep it out and put down flooring and rent that out to some people. Mother said it was awfully crowded, but she used to go to the theater and watch these movies. And during that time, the World War II, they had a lot of movies about the war. And people, of course, we didn't have battle on our land here in the United States. It was over in Europe. and it was Germany against so many of the countries, and they would invade the countries, and Japan, and they would invade the countries too, and so it was rather interesting. The women, I found this interesting that the women would volunteer, and they would have a bus, and they would pick them up in town and take them out there, and they would dance with the officers. Most of the officers were married, and but they would dance. They would just volunteer their time, and it was an activity. And I don't know if many of them led to romance, but a friend of ours did meet one of the officers who was single and wound up marrying him, and it was a very happy marriage. So I do know that. The story that I'm leading up to that I want to tell you that I found most interesting was that women often drove the buses and picked up the men and took them to town. Then if they were going to leave at, say, 10 or 11 o'clock, she would pick them up and take them back to the base. This night, this lady, and there were men drivers too, but some are ladies, she drove the bus, picked up the men in town, took them back out to the base, and let them out. One of the soldiers kind of went, I'm going to say, a little bit crazy, and he stayed on that bus, but he bent down at the back of the bus, and she would look in the mirror and she couldn't see anybody, so she thought she was going home. Everybody was off of the bus out to the base. So it's night, and she's driving into town, and she got part way into town, and she looked in the mirror, and she could see this man stand up. Well, it scared her, and she didn't know if he was going to kill her or what he was going to do. So she pulled the bus over and stopped and got out, and a lot of these were dirt roads, and she started running down that dirt road, and he was back behind her. Well, she didn't think to take the key out. She was just getting out of there and away from him. He got behind the wheel and started trying to run over her then. I guess to stop her, from reporting him. I'm not for sure what was wrong, but he had kind of gone berserk. So he was chasing her, and he would try to hit her, and he would miss, and he'd let her get ahead of him again, and he would aim again. And so the roads weren't very wide, and they were country roads, and he ran her into the barbed wire, and she got tangled in that barbed wire, and he went on and left her there. He didn't hurt her any further than that. So he went to town. I don't know where he took the bus. I never did know that part of the story. I wish I'd have asked. Now everybody's dead that knew about it. But anyway, they found her, and she reported what had happened. And I guess they took her to the hospital to be sure that she was well. She wasn't seriously hurt. But they were starting to search for them. So they have their own police on the bases. I don't know if you knew that or not, but even back then, they had their own police. So they let those police come out, all those soldiers, and they were going all around looking for him. Now, they figured he put the bus someplace, and he might be in town, and he might have broken into one of the houses. So they went to the different houses, and they would search. Well, they thought he might be at the edge of town, and that's where Mother and Dad lived. And they had the house, and then there was a barn back here, and behind it, and a few other buildings, a chicken coop, and everything. Well, it was early in the morning, and the sun was just coming up. My mother was Choctaw Indian, and she was a delightful person, but sometimes she got mixed up on things, and you have to remember, she had watched a lot of these movies where the Japanese were invading and the Germans were invading these houses in Europe. And so someone's knocking on the door. So Mother got out of bed, and Daddy was still in bed. She said, I'll get it. So she went to the door. They trusted everybody in those days. And she opened the back door, and here was this soldier standing here. He was an officer. And she looked out past him, and they were going through the barns. I mean, soldiers were running everywhere with rifles. They were searching all the buildings back there and just going wild. Well, Mother said her heart just stopped, and she looked over at that man, and he was from New York. And you must remember, my mother was born in Oklahoma and lived in Texas, and she had developed a Texas accent just like I have. And so this man was from New York, and he said something to her. He was telling her that they were searching for this man who has escaped, and they were searching the barns for her not to be alarmed. Well, she looked at him, and she couldn't understand the word he was saying. He was from New York, and if you didn't speak with a Texas accent, my mother didn't know what you were talking about. You know, she was all to do with Texas. And so she looked at him, and he said something else to her. Well, she still didn't understand him. She slammed the door in his face, started screaming. Daddy said, I could hear her screaming, the Japanese have invaded. Well, she thought Japan had invaded, and she couldn't understand that man, so she thought, he's speaking Japanese. And he was really from New York accent. Well, I said, Daddy, what did you do? And he said, well, I got dressed. He said, I knew that we were too far inland. We would have known if they had invaded. I knew that it wasn't that. So he said, I got dressed. I went to the door, and the man was saying, your wife is upset. And he said, yes, let me explain to you that if you don't have a Texas accent, she thinks you're from another country. And so the man kind of laughed, and he explained about this man about to run over this lady. So they got a big laugh about that when they found out that what it was. But I thought that was interesting. It shows how innocent people were, and I often long for that innocence now. And I would look at Daddy would tell that story, and Mother would say, well, you couldn't understand the word he said. And I looked out there, and there were soldiers everywhere, and I said, Mother, didn't you notice it's a uniform? She said, they all wear uniforms. I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't understand him, so I thought he must be from Japan. And we have laughed about that a lot, and I just wanted to share that story with you. You know, I'm getting older, and I know a few stories that they told me that I find fascinating, and I just want to tell a few folks about it and share it with you. And I hope you will enjoy this. I hope you will subscribe to my channel, and if you want to find out more about me, well, go below this video, and you will see a link to my website. And I hope you will watch my readings and listen to my stories. There are games to play. I have several games on this. When I get through today and get them downloaded, I'll have done 50, and I'm trying to do some that will help you, some that will entertain you, some that will maybe give you ideas of how to make extra money. I'm afraid we're in for some rough times where money's tight, and I know I'm feeling the pinch, and I think maybe some other people are. And so there are ideas of how to make money, how to group together for a little business, something that you wouldn't have any overhead, gardening, lots of different things. And I hope you will watch them and listen to them. I'm trying to get to be known, and so I don't have a lot of subscribers yet. And I know there's so many people on YouTube, and it is enjoyable. I live for YouTube. And now I'm doing my own, and so it's fun. So I'm getting older, and no one will know these stories, and so I'm sharing a few of them with you. And I thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you will tune into some of my others. And if you want to bring up my website, just go below this, and you'll have it. Thank you so much, and goodbye.